Awesome. Well, my name is Daniel Malik. I'm the Director of Content and Innovation at Vue, and we're really excited to have a conversation today called Virtually Limitless. We're going to talk about some of the creative advantages of virtual production, and things that are possible, things that will one day be possible, and talk about the future a little bit as well. So, with that, I would love to go ahead and have our panelists introduce themselves, starting with you, Tom.
Cool. I'm Tom Thodiamplako. I worked on a short film last year called Fathead, which was with ETC, which is the Entertainment Technology Center at USC Film School. And it's a very unique project because we got to work with close to 50 manufacturers and technologists from all over the world with products that were pre-market. So we introduced them into the virtual production pipeline, and we're able to give them feedback, work with them one-on-one on how to improve some of those things to fit better into the technology integration. And the film ended up being an NAACP Image Award nominee, as well as we have got a white paper coming out in chapters. We've got 2 out, 2 more to go, and there's a lot of wonderful information in there.
I'm Todd Freeze, Chief Technology Officer of Resolution Studios in Chicago. We have 4 virtual production stages in Chicago, and we've been doing it for a really long time. We kind of started about 4 years ago, and it's been a great experience.
I'm Addy. I'm the Vice President of Virtual Production at Disguise. So I oversee the vertical in our company that's specifically for film and television.
I'm Owen Risley. We're from Cube, also Cube Studios, which is a virtual production studio based out in the UK. We come from production side as a creative producer, and we specialize in virtual production content, but also other productions for global brands and clients.
Very cool. Well, thanks, guys. So let's jump right into it. I'd love to open up the question to you all. I think we might all have a different answer to this. And that is, what is virtual production, and what are some of the things that you've seen recently that you're getting excited about in the space?
So to me, it's as simple as any set of tools that allow us to blend the virtual with the real for the sake of filmed entertainment is, for me, virtual production. And production, as we know today, is compartmentalized and we're assembling it. So these tools have made it very easy to assemble things in real time. And that's what is the exciting thing for me, and that has happened in the last few years. And what we're excited about right now is the integration of tools that, like AI and other things, that would probably condense the timeline as well as the budgets for some of the pre-production activities, which have been long for virtual production. And that would bring in more people into this pipeline, I believe.
I definitely think the term virtual production is such a huge category. I think I spend a lot of time talking with clients about when someone says, "Oh, I have a virtual production shoot." Like, what does that mean? Like, is it a 3D, fully, Mandalorian style virtual production, or is it plates? And I sort of think that the term kind of covers all of it. I kind of look at it as, it's a new technology that allows people to tell stories in a more efficient way. And I think that's the part that I find most exciting, is when you have somebody who virtual production really changes and makes certain scenes possible. We've done a lot of projects where, before we got involved, they were writing these scenes out of the script because they didn't think they could either pull it off logistically or budget-wise. And when you provide a tool set to them to allow them to tell their story, I just think that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. One of the questions that I wanted to ask, and this one I'm going to direct to you, Addy, are some of the effective techniques. Obviously, with Disguise, you have a really great workflow that you've developed. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, one of the things that is really awe-inspiring is bringing in a heavy-duty optical lens like an anamorphic into ICVFX and just letting the lens do the talking. So the anamorphics are expensive, but you get what you pay for, and you get the soft bokeh and the fall off and the vignetting and all those things that are really difficult to replicate in post, but just becomes really instant and almost like in the can as you're recording the shot. So bringing in these traditional principal photography elements into VP.
And the advantage of that, and I'd love for you guys to expound on this, but I see that as filmmakers, directors, DPs coming in, they're able to use the tools that they can use on other sets, on location, or other means of production. So, maybe speak a little bit to that, Owen, and how you've, utilized that with your productions.
No, certainly. I think what it enables us to do, well, we haven't specifically used with Disguise with some of our productions, but the workflow with what we've been able to achieve with the lenses and how we capture that sensitivity and the data and that realness, the softness and those touches within virtual production and Windows, the reality of it, and not just trying to fix it in post. And in-camera VFX, which is also a term that's coming along with virtual production, is a big part of what we're trying to improve within our process and within how we manage virtual production and shoot that. And for us, using this technology, using this hardware, and understanding how we incorporate more things in the real world that blend into the virtual is fundamental.
Very cool. Tom, obviously with Fathead, you basically pushed the limits of virtual production as far as they could possibly go. And the way that I took it is, it's like, what can we break? And then when we break it, how can we make it better? So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about some of the biggest technical advantages that you discovered recently, maybe even on Fathead, or things you're working on right now.
So one of the challenges right out of the gate for Fathead was we were going to work with children in the middle of a pandemic, and that was the biggest challenge. The other thing was the movie was set in a junkyard, so that's again a location that you don't want to take kids out to. So that immediately opened the window of exploration into virtual production, and we started looking at creating a junkyard paradise in Unreal Engine, and then basically Seacrake had in his script over 100 kids running around in this junkyard paradise. So we couldn't have those many kids on a virtual production volume. So we looked into virtual humans, and it was very early days for metahumans at the time. And we tried them. It used to be very heavy to run at the time to get the kind of processing and to basically look at having 60 of them up on the wall. Most people were just raising their eyebrows and saying that's not going to be possible. So we looked at other options. In addition to that, the other thing was fidelity, the ability to be able to make those characters look very similar to the characters that were going to be in the real world. And so we scanned them at the scan truck and were able to use different kinds of mocap data with them. And another thing that we tried because of COVID was a markerless, suitless mocap technique called Move.ai. And that was so that the kids don't have to exchange suits. We were able to work very efficiently with them. And also the director was able to visually just give them cues and direct them physically as if they were directing, he was directing them in front of the camera. So it was very convenient in all those ways. So those kind of ways that these tools existed for specific reasons, but within our pipeline, having access to the manufacturers, being able to talk to them about the way that we were working, the way that our director was perceiving it, and for them to tweak it and massage it and make it ready for us was very interesting. And I think that's something that I don't see happening very often in professional productions because people are very impatient and they want to get to the finished product. But if given the time, if there's enough time to massage the tools, people will leave much more happier, I think, in this particular field of work.
Very interesting. You mentioned timelines, and obviously that's the big thing. We often advertise virtual production as, you walk on the set and then you just click some buttons and all of a sudden you're traveling anywhere you want and it's, easy as cake. But we all know that's not the reality. So, I'm curious from all of you, feel free to chime in, anyone. What are some of the ways that you educate people, or even yourself as you're all creative? What are some of the things that you're taking into consideration when you're spinning up a new project?
Well, I'll start. One of the things that we talk to is a lot of producers that the normal production cadence for virtual production is a little bit different than it has been for the last 25 years. You need to get us involved much sooner. The example I always give is somebody calls me today and wants to shoot next week. If the stage and crew is available, no problem. If somebody wants to do a virtual production job next week, it's probably not going to happen regardless of how much money you have, unless it's an existing element. So, I think it's really important to understand that to get the best results, the sooner you involve the studio and the tech team, you definitely get much better results.
I think also with the creative, people are drawn to virtual production by the buzz, and they try to shoehorn a project into virtual production that doesn't necessarily fit, and managing client expectations of and initiating it from the creative from the beginning to create an idea that can warrant and serves its purpose well within virtual production is paramount. Not just trying to say, yeah, let's make it virtual production for the sake of it. You have to often say, well, actually, you're better off doing this in the real world or doing this a different way. And that's a big part that people have to consider.
Definitely, and then the doing the homework, which is tech viz, right? So it's not about building this incredible digital world, but also you have to match the practical world to it. So where's your origin point? What scale is it? Is a person 6 foot tall? Then is the wall 21 foot tall? Doing that homework up front will save a lot of headache on set.
So tech whiz, yeah, is the keyword over here. And I think visually the idea is you have to give a kind of coherence in the physics of what is in the virtual world and the real world. And that's where things usually fall apart, whether it's the physics of the visual aspects of it, light, color, all of those things, or just physics in terms of dimensions and the way that things move in correlation to each other. So those things have to be fixed, and it takes some massaging over there.
And so, what are some of the tools and things that you're using early on in the process that are helping you with that?
Well, Unreal is obviously the starting point for anything that we work on, and then depending on what studio we work on, they're comfortable with working with other tools that they've already brought on, from whether they come from game development or from VFX or whatever field, and we go with it. But at the end of it, it comes down to the principles of it. It has to work to serve the story, number one, and B, to serve the physics of the world wherever it's set.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of previs days. Early on where the volumes are midway through construction, right? And if you can swing the schedule where everybody comes onto the stage, you set up, and you're not shooting anything, but you're basically kind of doing a little bit of a rehearsal, right? A lot of times that you will spot problems early on when it's very easy to rectify the issue. I certainly don't want to see volumes the first time the day before the shoot, because if there's a significant issue with scale, which is or things like that, there's not a lot of time. Then you're really scrambling. So we're a big fan of test days. We just find that you always get tremendous value out of it.
Yeah, that's extremely accurate. In fact, we are such proponents of pre-light days that we encourage our customers to do it at View. Even say please do this. What do we have to do to make it happen? Because you're absolutely right. It makes things go so much smoother.
Yeah, we're at the point where we're making it a requirement for us, because we certainly don't want somebody to have a bad experience. And we just find in the last 4 years, probably 90% of the jobs, either the director, DP, or both, it's their first time doing virtual. Also, when you're working with somebody who's never done this technique before, it's a little overwhelming for them, especially for a DP at first. I'm all for bring them in the day before, we'll set stuff up, we'll make it work, so that they're not figuring out certain things. Because everything is changeable, it can be a little overwhelming at first, And so we just say, come in the day before, let's go through some stuff and have a little dress rehearsal.
Yeah, and the reality is when you're a creative person, you don't want to be on set learning this thing for the first time in front of your peers, in front of your client, all that stuff. So it's great to hear you're doing that, because it's extremely important. So this panel is called Virtually Limitless. I'd like to shift the conversation a little bit and talk about what are some of the things right now that either you're working on or things that you're seeing that are getting you excited about virtual production. I know for me, I may have an idea of something, or we may build a wall and, think people are going to do one thing with it, but I'm always blown away with the creative ideas and the innovative things that people bring into the studio. So I'm curious to hear some of the things you guys are seeing right now.
Yeah, I'll start. So, big announcement from us is Move AI integration, right? So it's the ability to bring in a person without the traditional mocap hardware and the markers and the suits, just right into the volume. So now, you're opening up creative possibilities to have an avatar or several avatars with several real actors in the same space in real time. What does the creative do with it? I don't know, but it sounds really exciting.
Shoot a Bollywood song with hundreds of extras.
There you go, all in sync.
we've been doing a lot of R&D and for high-speed photography. You know, Chicago's a packaged good town. There's a ton of tabletop work. It's a big industry in Chicago, and you know, being able to shoot at 270 with a bolt motion controller and things like that, and getting it to sync up with the wall and Unreal and stuff. Trying to be able to to have a workflow that works, but also a workflow that's affordable, right? Because like you start getting into a lot of expensive gear to do it. So it's one of the areas that we're spending a lot of time doing R&D on.
Very interesting. So, kind of on that note, and talking about how sometimes this technology is very complicated, very expensive, you know, we've seen over the past few years more people innovating, coming together, simplifying it, making it more accessible. I think we still have a long ways to go, but I'd love to talk about that a little bit in some of the trends you're seeing for the creative, for the person who maybe they can't travel to the Himalayas to shoot their story or commercial or whatever it is, but virtual production allows for that. So I'll ask the question to you, Owen, and I'd love to hear others as well. But when we're thinking about democratizing the virtual production technology in the filmmaking process, what are some of the things that you're thinking about?
Well, I think ultimately it's all come together through multiple entities and lots of communicating and collaboration through, I think, the growing number of entities as it gets on with Disguise and other tracking and other integrations. So the simplification is obviously a fundamental part of allowing more people to use it and to create some unity within that multiplicity of direction and parts that are involved. And I think with View and with what we've opening our studio, it's about having this functionality that we can create this studio that works and it functions and it's simple and there's a place that you can come and film and open it to the commercial world, the commercial sector, and not just build these bespoke screens that function for features and so on. And I think empowering that and empowering more people to have the opportunity to use virtual production is the first part of allowing the industry to take it and to utilize it from multiple perspectives, whether it's traveling, whether it's location, whether it's sustainability. That industry, our industry as a whole, needs to gauge that influence and empower the whole part of it from all entities. And I think that's how we start that conversation. And obviously there's a smaller scale with these semi-small moving parts that you can do this on a consumer level. And that's obviously, you can't do everything there, but there are now with in-display and other just entities within Unreal that it is making it more accessible because that's free fundamentally.
I was going to say, one of the things we see, especially here at NAB, is the sort of productization of virtual production. 4 years ago, virtual production, I think for everybody, was a science project, right? Like, it was duct tape and vice grips, and we'd get it to work and did a lot of really great stuff, but it was really difficult, sleepless nights, because there was a lot that could go wrong. And I think every year we're seeing, so much investment in the different parts of the technology to make it happen. And I think that goes a long way to lowering what it costs to do high-end virtual production. Less crew, lower day rates to make it accessible to more. And I think also people kind of got over, when Mandalorian came out, everybody thought you needed this monster wall to do virtual production. And they sort of created a little bit of a monster. And we did a lot of shows on a 20-foot wall. So I think a lot of people are, sort of being realistic of it's great to have a giant, huge volume, but you don't need that for all shows. And so I just think the type of stuff that we're seeing is a huge diversity from really big shows to just smaller stuff, and it's not an all or nothing. I don't know, it seems like a lot of clients thought that, we do a lot of TV commercials as our biggest market, but you have to do the whole commercial in virtual. I'm like, no, we can do one shot. There's nothing to say you can't shoot a couple of days on location and come just for the one. And so it's sort of interesting that it's so different that clients kind of have to be reminded of the obvious. It's like sometimes they get so into the tech that they kind of lose focus of just general filmmaking principles of keep it simple.
Yeah, and it kind of you have to look at virtual production a little different from the standpoint. I always think of it like when you're looking at your own image during a Zoom call, and depending on whether it's mirrored or not, you try to fix your hair and you're like doing the wrong side and you don't know what's happening. So virtual production is like that. Like, I mean, what are you going to move? Are you going to move the camera or are you going to move the world? So you have to figure those kind of things out. But at the initial stage, when you're figuring out your shots, I think it's good to jump into Unreal and fluidly test out things the way that a director and a DP and production designer think in the real world. And once you've got that idea of where the flow of things are, then translate it for the stage. And then you kind of have to invert the physics sometimes or whatever it is. But you need to have a starting point that is very fluid that people think of with their eyes closed.
Very good. And something that you said, Todd and Tom, I actually think you're going to have a good thing to play off of this as well. Is bigger isn't always better. One, typically that means that stage was more expensive to build, so it's going to be more expensive to rent. But also, it means that you need to bring in more art and production design and all that stuff. And one of the things Eric was sharing with us when he was doing the roadshow about Fathead is you guys experienced that. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
We were given the opportunity to be the first production to go onto the Amazon Studios virtual production stage, the largest in the country at the time. And but we were moving from a smaller stage where we were preparing everything for us. So suddenly when we moved into this bigger world, we had to shift all of our coordinates about it, and also the production design. How much ground cover can you have? How many set elements could you build? And our budget wasn't as extensive, so we ended up being at this big volume, only being able to fill about a third of the space, and then figuring out how can we maximize our number of shots with just that third. So yes, I mean, you do need to have the budget of it's going to affect everything that proportionately balloons with the size of the stage.
They did at our studio, the Chicago chapter of the Fathead World Tour, and one thing that they said that really has stuck with me is embrace your limitations. All film production is managing risk and limitations, right? Whether they're budgets, logistics, there's a ton of things that are forced upon you. And sometimes if everything is an option and everything is changeable, it works against you. But embrace the limitations, whatever it is, and I think the creative block goes away and you start thinking clearly when you're not trying to think of everything as a possibility.
And the other thing is, Unreal Engine and 3D content is maybe not the answer all the time, right? So a lot of times you can just use a 2D plate, sometimes even an image, and if it's done correctly and if that's what the creative intent was, it'll be good enough. There's this new sort of growing trend that we're seeing now, especially on disguise stages, is 2.5D. So it's layering a bunch of videos and then getting parallax through your lens, through your camera. So that's a novel new technique that I think has a lot of promise.
We're probably seeing that as our number one success. Especially on the long form, a lot of times they have the money, but they don't have the time. No amount of money is going to buy you time. Maybe they change the creative, they're going in a different direction, and they want to do something in 2 weeks. And it's like you're not going to build an entire cityscape, right, in Unreal in that amount of time. And a lot of times it's a building that's 8 miles away is not going to have a lot of parallax in it anyways. Fly a drone, shoot a plate, build a couple objects in the foreground. I think the 2.5 is just a very efficient way to go.
Absolutely. You're spot on, and that makes me think about one of the other things I wanted to talk about, which is not only creative ideas and things that work well in virtual production, but even the whole idea of different types of content that traditionally or that aren't as possible with traditional means of production. I think XR is one that we're only scratching the surface of right now. I'd love to hear about some of that side of things. I think, Eddie, you probably have some good stuff to share there, but open up to everyone, not just related to XR, but just in general. What is some content that's innovative?
Yeah, without getting too down the wormhole, I think generative AI is coming, and it's going to merge with virtual production in a big way. And we're seeing early indicators of that. So there's a couple of really promising technologies from Kubrick and Valinga that is integrating, mid-journey generated plates in 2.5D right into a stage.
We're really interested in seeing a lot of uptick in using virtual production style workflows in other industries. One half of our company is like very large scale live event staging, and we're seeing a lot of places like if you're a large retail chain and you're doing a manager's meeting with it's in a big ballroom and you're trying to show off the new store design. Instead of just showing pictures, why not transport the people into the new environment? So like we just keep seeing we're seeing a lot of corporations that sell working with a company that makes really crazy electrical connectors, but their products are used in coal mines, wind turbines, offshore drilling, places that they can't take their clients to show their products in action, but they can definitely fly them to a studio and transport them to all these places that are too dangerous to physically go. So I don't know, I'm really intrigued how this same technology can be used in completely non-related industries.
I think for me, what's also exciting is all of the progression around basically virtual production in some instances starts with a very blank page, an extremely blank page. And all of this innovation is about being able to process the idea, the image, the concept art in a quicker and more efficient way. Because everybody has the image, it's about sharing that image across the board, and so that we can all be on the same page. When it's a real world, you can show them a photo of what the location is, but we've all got to be on the same page of a virtual world that doesn't exist yet. So the quicker we can generate this imagery, generate the 3D or 2.5D, is actually going to increase the overall understanding of what we're trying to achieve and aid the storytelling as a whole, not only the production process and workflow.
Awesome. Well, with that, I wanted to take our last few minutes and open up to any questions from the audience. So if you have any questions for any of our panelists, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Umut. I'm a real-time virtual production consultant. So I'm wondering your ideas, what you're thinking about that. So we have all the tools actually right now today for real-time virtual production, which can take us to a quite high quality. So we can set up our workflow according to our projects, and it goes all well. But I think which I think we have a headache that the parties, the unions, the parties, the roles on the set. Sorry for that. So in a small scale projects, it's manageable. But when we are go for quite large level of projects, when there are hundreds of crews, it becomes difficult to, communicate between parties. And I think there's a big bottleneck in terms of intellectual knowledge flow between the parties. Director to VP to the assistants on the crew and LED companies and stuff. Especially Andy probably get what I'm trying to say because of his role, so he may probably think that, it could be much better, man. But now in that scale, it's not always easy to get that communication between the parties. I'm wondering, you guys, when you go up a quite big scale, how do you think that make these communication easier between parties to put everyone in the same track, and if there is a kind of a chance we have, if we can standardize this, not in a technical way, but like a communication between parties and unions. Thanks.
Yeah, so what are some of the ways, I think Fathead is probably a really good example of that. How did you communicate that? Because that was a massive production.
Well, a ton of Zoom calls and Slack. So it was all about communication. Our director was probably taking close to 6 Zoom calls a day, if not more, and then answering about 30 emails and maybe another 30 plus messages on Slack. And so it was really about being able to be, very impromptu to all the questions that come across departments and being able to respond to them. And the other thing was our EP, Ben Baker, had put together a very extensive and exhaustive Airtable, which captured pretty much all of these touch points from every department. So you could go by, the draft of a certain script. You could go to a certain scene number, or you could search it through a character's endpoint. You could say this character, and how has that changed from draft 1 to draft 20 or whatever, and then how has it evolved visually across notes from different departments. So data collection is very critical, and being able to transparently communicate across departments with that data.
It's all about meetings. I don't think this is a new problem. This has been a problem that, you know, the film industry has always had, right? If you're trying to do something really large and there's a lot of departments, there's a lot of opportunity for miscommunication. So, you know, obviously digital tools, definitely like Slack and things like that. But I think, like, you know, something as basic as bi-weekly check-in calls that are all hands on deck calls, even for departments that don't have anything, so that everybody can just say where they're at. Because a lot of times that you may overhear something that could affect you down the road, and it's your time to raise your hand or ask a question or something like that. But, you know, in the end, it's about good communication skills.
I mean, I'll just add one last note. A lot of it has to do from the top down when you manage a production. So producers, it's somebody like Tom that really understands what VP really is, and they can manage that chaos really, really well. So educated producers is key.